Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Ms. Bell, would you take roll, please?
Ms. Fowler,
Here.
Mr. Lane,
Here.
Dr. Roberts,
Present.
Ms. D. Jones, Ms. D. Jones,
Oh, here.
Ms. Vowell,
Present.
Ms. S. Jones,
Present.
Ms. Rhodey Collins.
Here.
We have a quorum.
We'll say the pledge. I believe the first item on our agenda is a review of the January consent agenda. There were not any requests submitted ahead of time, but I will open it up for any questions or comments now. So if we could just take them one by one, just so we can, but there's only 11 items, so I think that makes sense. Item 1, which is an application for purchasing cards. Item 2, contract renewal with the Alliance of Parents and Children for Educational Empowerment. Item 3, a contract with Mechanical Solutions for some boiler work. Item 4, contract renewal with USI for benefit consulting. Item 5, contract renewal with Harris Stowe State University for the Finish Line Dual Enrollment Partnership. Item 6, acceptance of funds from the Missouri, from DESE for refugee students. Item 7, which is an amendment with, to a previous board resolution for some live stream cameras for athletic games. Donna, do you have a question?
I do have a question. I wanted to know what are the terms of this contract and why aren't we utilizing our own students to provide this service, a live stream service for our games?
So as a result of the pandemic, we are not having any visitors in games, only 2 parents per student. And so this allows us to tape the games to get to coaches such that the athletes who might be considered for scholarships and others can see those, plus parents at home can also do the same thing. So we're not asking any kids to come in to do any kind of taping as we normally would because of the pandemic. So this is strictly around basketball, volleyball games in gyms.
Thank you.
Item 8, a contract with the City of St. Louis and the Workforce Development Board. Item 9, sole source purchase of something for the EMT and fire programs at Gateway and something law enforcement program at Northwest. Item 10, acceptance of funds from the City of St. Louis and the Workforce Development Board to support adult education literacy. And item 11, which is a purchase of some Microsoft Office software. Any items that we need to revisit? Any questions on the consent agenda as a whole? So that will be for approval in January. Dr. Adams, I will turn it over to you.
Our first item on the agenda is an audit update. Mrs. Banks, do you want to have?
Thank you. We have completed our fiscal year 20 audit, and our auditor, Reuben Brown, Mr. Jeff Winters, will come and present an overview.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me okay? Wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with the board today to present the results of our 2020 audit. Very happy to be meeting with you this evening. And my name is Jeff Winter. As Angie said, I am the engagement partner for the St. Louis Public Schools financial and compliance audit. I've been involved with the district audit for quite a few years, and the district is a very important client of Reuben Brown's, and we appreciate the opportunity to be of services to you. You have in your packets, or maybe even on your tables, the draft copies of the reports that will be issued once finalized. We're very close to being done. As usual, and as in the past, we come to this meeting with drafts to get your acceptance, and then we go to press with finals. These reports are due to the state and the Government Finance Officers Association before December 31st, which with the holidays, we are trying to get this done, obviously, before Christmas, and I see no reason why we shouldn't. I want to thank Angie and her staff for their cooperation throughout the audit process. Boy, this talking with a mask with glasses takes a little bit getting used to. I'm going to take a risk. Want to thank Angie and her staff for their cooperation and assistance throughout the audit process. There were no limitations or any roadblocks in our ability to conduct our procedures. I also want to especially thank them because there was some turnover in the fiscal control management position over the year. Ron Martin resigned and retired at the end of last year's audit. There was an interim fiscal control manager in place, and he decided to retire right when the audit began. So we try not to take those things personally, but that is not a normal situation. But a new fiscal control manager was hired. The staff that have been there for many years really were instrumental in getting things going. There were some issues with regard to the turnover that we'll get to in just a minute, but overall, the audit went very well, very smooth, and we're here tonight to discuss the results. I also want to mention that we met with the audit committee earlier today, a good hour-plus meeting, discussing the details of the reports, answering questions. So tonight, I'm just going to be brief as possible, and summarize the results, and of course, entertain any questions that other board members may have. The viewpoints document, you don't need to follow along, and I apologize for not having a PowerPoint tonight, but this is what I'm going to be basically discussing, and that is the PowerPoint looking document if you do want to follow along, that discusses the report to governance. We are assisted by Randall and Associates, a minority business enterprise that conducts approximately 20 to 25% of the audit field work and participates in a similar amount in the fees. They have been our partner for many years on this audit as well as others. There's also 3 managers from Reuben Brown assisting myself and numerous staff people from the firm, along with Randall and Associates. We begin our work in mid-September, and so you can see it's quite a substantial audit. We do 2 audits for the district, the audit of the financial statements and the audit of federal grant compliance. And that's why you have the 2 other reports in your possession. I just want to talk about what our objectives are with regard to the audit. Of course, we're auditing the financial statements as well as the compliance with laws and regulations over your federal programs. And our audits are performed in accordance with professional standards. And those standards require that we plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable but not absolute assurance that the financial statements are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles and free from any material misstatement. We also audit the compliance under the same premise that we obtain reasonable, not absolute assurance that there was no non-compliance with the laws and regulations over your federal programs. I'm pleased to report that our opinion, which is the result of our audit, is an unmodified, clean opinion on the financial statements, which basically states that they are free of any material misstatement and presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles in the United States. And we are also issuing an unmodified clean opinion on your compliance with your federal major programs that represents that there was no material noncompliance noted through our audit process. The federal grant audit consists of auditing major programs which are determined by a risk assessment. So we don't audit all the federal programs. You spend over $50 million of federal grant money during the year, approximately $49 million. And based on our guidelines and risk assessment, we audited 3 programs this year: the nutrition cluster, the supper program, and Title IV, which is supporting teachers, all encompassing greater than 20% of the federal expenditures spent during fiscal year 2020. I want to highlight that we did have one management letter recommendation reconciling procedures. There were more than usual audit adjustments necessary to accurately state and reconcile certain account balances that are represented in the financial statements. Those key account areas were primarily cash, revenue, related accounts to revenue, such as deferred revenue, which is money that you receive in advance but haven't spent yet or haven't earned because you haven't met eligibility requirements. And of course, receivables, which is money that you have earned but you haven't received in cash yet. Mainly related to grants. Certain grants receivables were recorded twice when you were transitioning to a new general ledger system. As such, certain receivables booked as of June 30 did not actually result the collectible amounts. Certain local grant funding that is received in advance and recognized when eligible grant expenditures are incurred were not reconciled and required some adjustment. And so the long and short of it is we did issue a recommendation primarily saying that the district has spent significant time and effort developing policies and procedures for year-end processes and schedules over the years. And we've seen vast improvements over the last 5 to 7 years with regard to accounting policies and processes and internal controls. Many new procedures have been developed. However, we recommend that systems be put in place or those that are in place be adhered to more timely to allow for timely closing, review, and reconciliation of these account balances to be performed in the future. That is our only recommendation. We did include some updates on prior year recommendations that are included in your package, which I'm not going to go over in detail at this point in time. And that really concludes my report with regard to the 2020 audit. I know it was brief, but again, we did meet with the audit committee, which 2 of the members are present this evening, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions that anyone might have at this time. Okay, very good. Well, thank you and have a good evening and happy holidays.
Thank you. Ms. Banks? Ms. Banks, financial update, December financial update, please.
Okay, I will just also note that our monthly financial statements are posted on the website in case anyone is interested in looking at that on a regular basis. We also have a check register that is updated at least quarterly that's posted on the website as well. So on to the monthly financial statement. This also will be quite brief as that not a lot of information has changed. We know the financial objectives. The agenda we'll actually be covering the November month revenues and expenditures and going over a little bit of an outlook. There's not much for the COVID update. This is the transportation supplement grant is still one that we have not had any expenditures against at this point. We must expend these funds by June 30 or they will be forfeited. These are basically expenditures that First Student might have in cleaning their buses and things like that. So they are not direct district expenditures, but if First Student had some, then they could certainly pass that along and they could take advantage of this grant. Again, not a lot of updating on the CARES spending. There was a little bit that was spent in the month of November. You can see that the grant utilization is 30% of the original allocation. We know that deliveries are really tight right now with Christmas and with the uptick in the pandemic activity. A lot of organizations are ordering things, and now we're getting ready to run into the vaccine deliveries. So we have ordered additional PPE primarily for when students will return. So basically for the third quarter, we have already made some additional orders and hope to start receiving those items likely in late January. So this is the basically major highlights for November. November was a short holiday month. Of course, the district was off for a full week during November. The major difference are going to be payroll expenditures that you see, since there were only 2 pay periods in November versus 3 being in October. Some of the largest expenditures I've noted here, expenditures that were over $100,000 for the month of November, they total about $2.5 million in total for November. And they were primarily in student support type services. That's with our supplemental grant where we receive these services. Some maintenance services, general supplies, some testing, and also some software payments. There's obviously many other expenditures that happen in smaller quantities, as you'll see in the next couple slides. So the November results for revenue, these are for all funds during November. We received about $7.6 million. You can see that in red, and $31.2 million year to date, or about a little less than 8% of the revenue budget. So still through November, our largest revenues include delinquent property taxes, sales taxes, and state aid. Those all fall within the general operating budget, but more federal revenues are starting to come in. And there were several updates from October that were omitted in the last month's update. So October would be considered final at this point, where November might still be a little bit preliminary. So the November expenditures for all funds, we spent approximately $24.8 million in November, $111.6 million year to date, or a little less than 28% of our expenditure budget, of course, across all funds. As you can see in the salary and benefit lines, that November is less than October, and that's because there were the 3 pay periods in October versus 2 in November. And again, if you look at all the other categories outside of the salaries and benefits, you can see that there's a little bit more than I think $3 million in expenditures, and we just talked about how about $2.5 million included those larger expenditures that represented $2.5 million. So we have submitted a board resolution to approve a purchasing card with our current bank, US Bank. The major benefits include more timely vendor payments and also a rebate that we would receive, the district would receive basically money back from using this card for all eligible vendor purchases that we paid for on the card. Of course, this is something that the vendor will have to agree to, and we are working through the details with the bank. There is a rebate kind of like algorithm, if you will. And I know that I did some preliminary estimates. And for example, if we spent or we used the card for $25 million of vendor payments, the district would receive probably in the neighborhood of $300,000 back in rebate. But again, this is a project that will be kind of a pilot project because we have to make sure that all of our back-end processes, our reconciliations are taking place, and that it's something that we can handle and it will go smoothly, basically. Of course, one of the biggest things we've been anticipating is our tax revenue. December is the first month where we receive a big chunk of our tax revenue. We receive 2 payments in December, 2 payments in January. We generally just receive 1 payment a month from the city. We did receive our first payment in December. It was about $17 million, which was pretty close to the amount that we received in the prior year. We anticipate receiving, maybe another $30 to $40 million in the 3rd week. And then our January payments are the largest amount of our tax payments. And I think that's about $110 million, I think. And then I guess finally, with our structural and academic efficiencies, of course, we await the board's decision. And although whatever the decision is, it will be, all departments will be impacted, but I did want to highlight that human resources and the operations departments will definitely have a heavy lift in this project. And that really concludes my update, and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions for Mrs. Banks? Thank you, Ms. Banks.
Thank you.
First of all, good afternoon, good evening. This is a recommendation. The item on the agenda is a recommendation for school consolidation. Before I start the discussion or recommendation, I'd like to give some comments first. In December 2019, we started the process of reviewing data to determine how we could provide greater services to our students. When I say we, I mean the administrative team started that process over a year and a half ago. it was clear to us that one of the areas that we needed to address was the size of our schools. We knew at the time we embarked on this conversation that this would be a difficult conversation for the board, the community, students, and staff. We understand that. After surveying the board, with the exception of one new board member, Mrs. Fowler, and we asked if they could make the decisions to provide more services to students, even if it meant school consolidation or closings. The board unanimously said yes. These were individual conversations with board members, not necessarily in any kind of meeting context. We engaged an outside credible party, Emerging Wisdom, to assist in developing and engaging and managing the process of receiving input from a variety of constituents. Those included students, teachers, parents, clergy, administrators, nonprofits, and others. After over 600 radio spots, social media outreaches, and a posting of information in 3 newspapers, they held 6 community visioning workshops over a 2-week period of time, including 2 on Saturday and 4 during the week in the afternoon. Pages and pages of notes were taken that were then transcribed into this document, the document that I have with me today, some 36-page document. A discussion took place at the March board meeting on March 10th. As a matter of fact, the president gave an update and public comments were made as it relates to information about the plan, and that plan will be discussed on March 24th at the March 24th meeting. The district plan. On May 12th, in a virtual work session, Emerging Wisdom presented their findings, and those findings were posted on the district website. A decision after that meeting was made to postpone the conversation until October of 2020. At the October 27th meeting, the board started the discussion again of consolidation. The discussion continued in November and in December. The criteria for selecting schools was discussed and approved by the board. The school names were released on December the 1st. I personally spoke with each alderperson with the exception of one prior to the names of the school being released. And since that time, I've had conversations with that one alderperson. Since that time, we received over 700 comments, the board and myself as well, from the public after the presentation. We have received over 4,100 chats that included questions and comments. We responded in a work session on the in a meeting to receive on the 8th, rather, 3-hour open session as we read questions and answered questions. Numerous elected officials, community leaders, advocates, and organizations have raised issues about the consolidation and the closure of schools. What is incredibly clear to me is that this has been a conversation almost exclusively about buildings and neighborhoods, which some would say are more important, are more about an adult agenda than a student agenda. In my first statement, I indicated we started the process of reviewing data to determine how we could provide greater services to our students. That was the context of the conversation. That is what we have intended to try to frame for the community and the board. But obviously, when you talk about school buildings in the community, it changes or fractures the conversation. Again, we started looking at data. Number one, we look at the decline in the population of citizens in the city of St. Louis, which resulted in a decline in the number of families. In 2010, there were 319,000 persons. Today, there are 297,000. The number of children has declined from 60,000 to about 45,000. Number two, at the same time, the number of schools has increased from 103 to 110. I framed that in my presentation. I'm framing it again. As we talk about this number of closing school buildings, there are others out there that are talking about opening schools. And so part of what politically needs to happen is something like a moratorium on what we're doing until we could come up with a citywide plan for what needs to happen if this is such a critical issue for this community. We also talked about the district resources being provided to students in the St. Louis Public School District that were far less than those that were provided to the surrounding school districts. Things like advanced placement, electives, discretionary funds to support schools individually at the school level, certified staff, the fact that we cannot get enough certified staff because we have so many buildings that we are trying to support, and support services. Things like counselors and nurses that are so critical at this point in time through the pandemic. I also want to mention, as we talked about the decline in the population, a vote was taken that reduced the number of aldermen from 28 to 14, aligning itself to the fact that there's a reduction in the number of citizens in the city of St. Louis, and obviously the notion that less persons are needed to support that population. So we are aligning ourselves with what's already happening in our community. It is with the mindset of providing greater resources to our students that these recommendations have been made. Let me articulate and provide to the public a much more granular view that I provided to the board a couple of days ago. Number one, the notion of increased discretionary allocations. Part of what one of the recommendations is to increase it by at least $500,000 to increase the amount of discretionary dollars at the middle school, high school level. It would also mean that more students are in those buildings, so more dollars will be allocated to those schools. The title dollars, which would decline this year as a result of our decline in population, because it's tied to a decline in our dollars are tied to the population, will stay the same as a result of, even though the decline would take place, it looks like we will keep the same number of same amount of dollars per student. The number of AP courses would increase from about 100 right now to 104, depending upon what kind of decisions we make around the schools that are high schools that I'm recommending. The number of electives would increase from 317 to about 352, giving every high school student an opportunity to have more electives. It would also mean at the elementary level, instead of having a 0.5 PE, music or art, full-time allocations in those places. In terms of nurses, right now we're sharing nurses in schools. The intent would be that every single school would have their own nurse. The board has articulated this notion as we go through this pandemic of having a nurse in every single building. We have students, some schools that have 20 and 30 students who have EpiPens. And the fact that we have a nurse there 1 day a week, 2 days a week, this will be limited by the recommendation that I'm making. Counselors, every school would have a full-time counselor. Right now, we have 19 schools sharing counselors. Social workers, we have 40 social workers supporting 68 schools. We would change the model such that we would have a tier 1 and tier 2 support, such that social workers could support every single school, maybe not every single day, but support every single school. So that would mean that we will have a support staff in every single building, meaning a social worker or a counselor. In terms of security, we would make sure that we have an allocation at every single one of our elementary schools. At this point in time, we only have 2. We would have to increase the allocations by 11 to do that. If we did not close in the schools, we would not be able to do that. Custodians, Mrs. Jones, Mrs. Donna Jones brought up the notion of having only a couple of custodians in every building. Right now, we have only 2 in some elementary schools. We would increase that to 3, and obviously at the high school level, fully increase the number of custodians to support the school. Right now, that's not taking place. Family community specialists, increasing the number of family community specialists, or making sure that we have 1 full-time person in every single school to align themselves with supporting families. We talked about the notion of a K-12 virtual school, the notion of reading coaches in every school that had a reading level below 3.0, grade level 3, and also internships for our seniors. This notion of thinking differently and outside the box. A plan has already been put in place to look to do that. So as we talk about the school consolidation, and the focus has been on neighborhoods and schools, which I totally get and understand, and losing a school is like a debt. And I understand that and recognize that. But the other side of that is we are lacking providing the resources that our students so desperately deserve. And I cannot in good conscience continue to provide those those reduced services to some of our neediest students that we all recognize and understand. So these recommendations gives us an opportunity to provide that support. The board received a lot of information from me, a lot from the community, a lot of concerns. Let me reframe or remind the board of the emerging wisdom conversation. There were 5 questions that they asked. Question number 1, what do you think of the St. Louis public school system as it is today? What is 1 or 2 words that would use to describe it? The number 1 word was under-resourced. What we're trying to do here and what we're doing is to try to address some of the under-resourcing, if you will, of the schools that we have. We simply cannot provide the services to the schools to all of the schools that we have. We just simply can't do it. Question number 2, what do you think of a system of excellent schools? What comes to mind? Number 1, highly qualified staff. We don't have highly qualified staff in every school because we have a shortage of key staff, math teachers, science teachers, social studies teachers, language teachers. Why? Because we have so many schools that we're trying to accommodate, and we're trying to provide everything to everybody, and we just don't have the resources to do so. Number 3, to achieve a system of excellence, what must be the district's top priority? Number 1, 92% of the persons who participated in this effort, over 1,000, improve teacher quality and retention. Can't do that unless we provide better benefits and professional development. We're at the cusp, as the board knows, of trying to reach some agreement with our local partners, our union, and feel confident that we can do that and look to get in a better place around that. Increase student support services. That means, i.e. full-time nurses, i.e. full-time social workers, i.e. full-time counselors, enough support staff to adequately accommodate custodians in our buildings. So the community is asking for that. That's what they're asking for. Number 4, do you agree with the criteria the district has used to inform its school closure and consolidation decisions? We changed those criteria based upon what the community said. We moved from academic achievement to enrollment. We moved from citywide development and feeder patterns to neighborhood impact. So we've listened to the community en masse to make the kind of changes that they recommended. Lastly, the one that I want to leave you with more than anything else at this point in time. Number 5, what must be done to lessen the impact of closures on district stakeholders and communities? Number 1, 2, and 3, which I think are important, and I'll go from the back forward from 3 to 1. Follow through on promises by delivering better services and more resources for all students and staff. That's what I just articulated. The 10 things we laid out is to do that. Number 2, ensure that closed schools do not become vacant, rundown buildings that further destabilize neighborhoods and communities. That is a commitment that we all have to make, and the building revitalization consortium will look to do that. Plus, I think some things came to the table today that I'm going to frame in a few minutes that will get closer to that. And lastly, which I think is the reason for the recommendation I'm making to you tonight, provide timely, transparent, and honest communication regarding closure decisions and plans. I feel strongly that this board has done that. But obviously there are enough persons in the community, based on the feedback you're receiving and I'm receiving, that maybe they don't see it that way. I totally 100% disagree. But even with that disagreement, I think it makes some sense to pause. And this is my recommendation to the board tonight. I'm going to ask you to postpone the vote for 30 days until the January 12th board meeting. What does that allow to happen? Number 1, it allows me individually and my team to meet with organizations, elected officials, and partners to allow them to provide much more concrete recommendations that provides services. This is not about rhetoric. This is not about telling me what you think. This is not about me looking back about all of the issues that happened in the 1920s and 30s. This is about real resources with details that align itself to the 11 schools that we're talking about, or other resources. Enough churches and organizations have reached out to do that. I would start the process tomorrow if the board says yes, to set up meetings throughout the Christmas holiday to do that. I'm making a commitment to forget what's going to happen over the winter break, to meet with anybody who wants to meet with real concrete resources and ideas that turn quickly into a plan for what needs to happen. I'm not talking about 4-year plan or 3-year plan or 2-year plan. I'm talking about a plan now. So it's not about rhetoric. I'm not, don't want to listen to any more rhetoric. I read every single comment more than one time. I've listened to every email that has come. I've taken phone calls. I've been really responsive to trying to understand what the community is saying, and I think it makes some sense to pause to give 30 days for that to happen. The third thing that I have not done, Ms. Jones challenged me around this, and it made me think critically around this. Have we done everything possible to make sure that we have dotted all the I's and crossed every T and given people an opportunity? And I think the answer to that, almost in every case, is yes, with the exception of maybe 2 schools. And so what I would like to do is I've done in the past is to provide some time to meet with faculties of schools that I have not had the previous time to meet with and get feedback and suggestions from them. They're on the ground, they're in the neighborhoods. I have not done that in every single case because of the timeline that we have and the notice of putting out schools. So that would start as early as Thursday to allow them, before they go out for break, for Zoom meetings with key schools that have already looked at. I won't reach out to principals until tonight based upon the feedback from the board. And so what I'm asking the board to do is to pause. I'm not asking the board to stop. I will come back to the board on January 12th with recommendations. I will not walk away from those recommendations because kids' lives are too important. I am incredibly concerned about communities, incredibly concerned about buildings, incredibly concerned about the vocal voices that we're hearing. But what I'm more concerned about, and I was hired to be superintendent of the St. Louis Public School District to support the needs of kids. And that's what I'm going to focus on. And that's what these recommendations align to. I am not throwing anybody under the bus as it relates to their ideas or views. I acknowledge all of them, and I understand how difficult this is. I'll leave the board with this saying because I think it's incredibly important. Dream no small dreams, for they have no power to move the hearts of men. We've dreamed big to look at closing these schools, to look at providing support for all of our kids. I'm asking the board, like myself, to take a pause and come back on January 12th to relook at this idea of schools. One more thing I want to frame, because a lot has been said about this. The district right now has 17 buildings for sale and 3 are under contract. The district has sold 11 buildings since 2003. Some 60 buildings or schools closed. If this community doesn't understand that there needs to be some overall plan around schools in this community, then all of the and I won't call it noise, but all of the comments that have come don't really understand what's actually occurring. Even with the 17 buildings that we have out right now, the LRA has 1,870 available improved properties and 6,362 available lots. This is not just a St. Louis public school issue. This is a community issue around vacant buildings in our community. And we do not want to contribute to that, but we don't want to also be penalized for making decisions that best support our kids as the city and other parties and neighborhoods have made to support their own communities. Don't hold us to a standard that's higher than the standard that you put out as well, as we think about supporting 20,000 kids in our community. I'll stop at this point in time and give the board an opportunity to discuss my recommendation or to ask me any more questions.
Yesterday in our meeting, one thing that was said was that a sign of a good organization is one that can be flexible and adaptable. I think you just suggested showed both those qualities, your ability to be flexible and adaptable. And I applaud you for that. The one thing I do ask, however, is as you go out and meet people and talk to people, maybe some of the board members should go too, so that we can understand and hear what you're hearing. And I just want to, and I've been saying this for a while, I just want to repeat what you said. This is not just a school system problem. This is a St. Louis City community problem that we're dealing with. I've gotten quite a few emails and texts and things like that from people who, express their opinions directly to me. Some don't even live in the city to experience what we experience as a city. Some never had their kids go to city schools and never experienced the city schools. So this is a unique challenge to some that may not see the whole picture. So I appreciate you restating that this is a community issue, and as a community, we have to help the school district address this and not hold the school district to a standard that you don't hold our community to.
Hi, this is Natalie. Can you hear me? This is Natalie. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ms.
Okay.
Fowler.
I want to echo first Ms. Fowler's sentiments that I appreciate you postponing this until it seems now we have, since releasing the list of names, we have a lot more commitment from, it seemed nebulous before when we're saying we might close schools, but when we start listing names, as you mentioned before, Dr. Adams, that's when people kind of perk up and get, they take it more personally. So I feel like we have a greater investment now, and now would be a bad time to take this vote when we have people stepping up to help us. I mean, I've received calls from state representatives. I still have more calls to get through, alder people, committee people. I think that it is a good idea to step back and see what they're able to bring. And if in January you still recommend that we're closing 11 schools or 5 schools, then we'll reconsider it then. But when we have options on the table, it is a good idea to examine all of those. And I feel like after these past couple of weeks, we do have new options to consider. So that said, I'm wondering if we could visit the rest of the schools that are proposed for closure, since we do have a little bit longer timeline if the board votes to postpone this until January to accept this recommendation. Is that something that you would see as possible?
Yes, ma'am, we could make that happen. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and just for the public, could you reiterate the timeline of when the schools will actually close or not reopen if they were to close? Is that something that's happening in fall of 2021?
That would be the fall of 2021. Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Okay, some of the documentation was a little bit confusing on the wording. It was to accept the recommendation for this year, but it made it sound like maybe the schools were closing this year. So I think that losing a month of planning time for closing in fall 2021, when we have so many more options available to us, I mean, potentially, I think that that's worth the sacrifice. So I really, again, I appreciate your willingness to be flexible on this and to have listened to the community as we receive new feedback. Those workshops back in February and March were very informative, but when people have new information, people bring new decisions and people bring new ideas. So I really appreciate that again. And that's pretty much all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to reiterate something that was said, is that as we take this next month to, look at things again, we still have to make sure we stay focused on providing those resources to the students, because that's what we really are here about. We are here for. We certainly understand the attachment to schools and things like that, but the proposal, for the most part, was to ensure that we have the resources that people said are most important. And even as we take this month and hear more comments and things like that, we hope that those who present solutions keep in mind that the solutions should include accomplishing the promises we made concerning providing more resources to our students. Just wanted to remind the board that we have to, that's what we have to consider first and foremost, but also remind the community that that's what we're trying to do first and foremost, provide the resources necessary to better educate our students.
I'd like to speak. Dr. Adams, I want to thank you for the extension. And I just want to say that far too long, this discussion and actions around public education in the city has been ignored and undervalued. As a collective, it's important that we as leaders in this city are more proactive in addressing issues and less reactive. As we work to provide excellent schools, provide financial sustainability, fairness and equity, across the city. Over the next 30 days, I'm looking forward to having productive conversations with our fellow community leaders that will create excellent outcomes and meaningful solutions that will work in the best interest of the children in this city, family, and overall community. I personally am very appreciative to the members of this community, church leaders, and businesses that have sent emails or called me regarding this issue. The mayor of our city has been fairly silent, and it's clear to me what the charter school agenda has been. So with that information, we all know that election season is coming. It's going to take a community and everyone doing their part to ensure that we have successful, sustainable change in St. Louis. I'm looking forward to our team supporting the extension of Dr. Adams tonight. Thank you.
I would also like to see the candidates for mayor to come maybe speak with us as well about this subject.
Absolutely.
So I talked a little last night about how our role, we're the only elected officials that represent children. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. And all of these calls to postpone are not coming from the children. They're not coming from the families. They're actually coming from politicians or nonprofits or people who seek to gain, or maybe what I'm trying to say is they don't have quite the same stake in the game. So I have some real concerns over how on the night of the vote, we would actually be coming here to then postpone it, and how that does, and maybe it doesn't, but how that impacts the trust that we have with the families in our care, and how kind of these last minute decisions erode that trust or perpetuate trauma. So I think my big question here is what is going to be different this time? Because many of these schools have been on the list before. Some of them have been on the list several times, and the calls for postponing the vote have not had students at the center. They have not had anything actionable behind them, no commitment of funds or resources. And so what is actually going to be different? I think too, this idea of who can come with a plan in 30 days and save schools, billionaires are the people that can do that. And really, if we're going to save a school, it should come from educators or from families. And I just, I think relying on the business community or relying on politicians to save us, it's too easy for them to walk away when they realize how hard this actually is. And I don't support postponing the vote.
I think one thing Dr. Adams said is that it was based on a question that Susan asked, have you done everything for all the schools? If there are 2 or 3 schools where everything wasn't done, it gives us the time to do everything. And for him to reflect to say he's done everything. And I think that's important. So postponing for him to do everything for those 2 or 3 schools could be very important. So when that decision has to be made, and if we vote to close the schools, at least we can say everything was done for all the schools. And I think that's important. Another thing also is it just shows flexibility. If you're saying that we rush through this and you really have a plan and not just a email list that you ask everybody to send to us with words but not a real plan, at least if you really have something in a month, you can give it to us. And I agree with you. The chances of somebody giving us a plan that could save our schools, it is very small, because this changing what we've gotten what the city has gotten itself into is much more than a month decision. But I think sometimes it's important that we pause and give everybody a chance to reflect, because we have a lot of angry people who are commenting, who are making comments. They've heard all that we've said, maybe to give them time too to reflect on what we're asking. if you have a plan, come with a plan for the children, not the school building necessarily. And it allows them, us, and Dr. Adams time to reflect, Dr. Adams to research those other 2 or 3 schools to see if he's done everything. And we may very well come back with the same decision. I mean, I could vote tonight, but I want to be flexible where it could. And I think it's okay to give that extra month, because all we're going to do is lose a little time in the scheme of things. So.
Dorothy, when I hear you say that you're not in support of that, I respect your decision. But what I also hear is that you're telling our kids that they aren't worth another 30 days. And for me, they are. The people that I want us to have conversations with are people that have our school buildings in their ward. And what I can't remember is this board ever having a robust conversation with any of these individuals, even collectively, to see what resources we could actually really consider when making our decisions. So I don't think that 30 days is unreasonable. I think that our kids are worth it, as well as this community and the overall betterment of where we're looking to go. So I just want you to keep that in mind. And I know you're saying about the kids, but there are kids sitting with their families and their moms and dads right now listening to this conversation, and they need to know that they are worth it. Our kids far too long have a narrative about them that they don't want to do anything in life and that nobody cares. And we need to show them that we do.
I agree 100%. And for me, postponing it's not postponing, it's postponing at the last minute to where we say we're voting tonight, and then at the last minute, we're giving our responsibility to somebody else who in the past has not shown up for us in the way that we show up for our kids. So this feeling that we have had these schools, many of these schools have been on the lists before. Nobody's come to save them any of the other times. So to change our minds at the last minute and say that we're going to give it another 30 days feels like then everything is negotiable. And I think it's, and I said some of this last night, when I read these calls, and let's be clear, a lot of these calls to postpone didn't actually come to us. They were posted on Twitter, or they were posted somewhere else, and they never actually communicated with us as official. And so I think these feelings that we didn't do enough, when I hear Dr. Adams it is concerning to me that so many people in the city had no idea that this was going on. And I'm not saying this to change anyone's mind about postponing, because I think that is the will of the board, and that's how I've communicated to anyone that has asked me. So this is not about what this board, when this board decides to vote, because I have worked with you all for the past year and been in these conversations with you all. And if you all want more time, I support that. So I'm not trying to change anyone's mind on postponing. But what I am doing is asking, maybe it's just like shouting into the ether, where has everyone been when we have been doing it? And we have been doing this by ourselves. And at the 11th hour, we have been bombarded with emails that have told us you did it wrong, when what they should have said was, here is what we can do to help you. And they didn't. It has been, you did it wrong. You didn't do it our way. Now you need to stop. And that is what, to me, is not about kids. This is about grownups. And I don't understand how a city could abandon its school system. That's what I do not understand. And I think everyone at this table would say that we believe the way forward is to come together as a community and look for ways where we overlap. But time and time again, we have put out that hand in partnership and it has been denied. And so this to me, you know, we say kind of in St. Louis, like things are business as usual, or that's so St. Louis. And this is the most business as usual St. Louis thing I have ever seen in my life. And I don't understand it. I don't understand the inability to recognize all of the ways in which these systems depend on each other and the way our kids depend on those systems. And so I think this is completely absurd, quite honestly, that we have been engaged in this work for a year and nobody knew.
Dorothy, I understand your frustration. It's been like that for me since I was elected in 2013. When I think about the almost 40,000 people and everybody that voted for us on this board here, I don't even think about the fact that because we're speaking to other leaders across the city, that now they have some type of power, because quite frankly, they don't. But and for me, it's about doing my due diligence and making sure that I can check every single place so that I can make a properly informed decision. And so 30 days for me isn't giving my power over to anybody else. Everybody knows that we are the official elected Board of Education. There is no group in the city. There's no other elected official that can come out with any press release or anything like that to say, I made this board do something, because we represent the people and we are here to make the right decisions in the best interest of our kids. And so I'm willing to put that to the side for now on how I feel about that, to make sure that I do the proper digging, like I just said before, to get the answers I need to make the right decision. That's it. But I do understand your frustration. And it's like that for me. It shouldn't take for this city to almost fall off the side of the earth for people to pay attention, and then people to just pop up out of nowhere because you're running for office, and then now you want to be attached to the issue of public education. That's a problem. But we know how to make sure that those things are seen as well.
I just want to make a comment about, I appreciate Dr. Adams' decision. And I say, thank you, Jesus. I understand it very clearly because I've been sitting on this board since 2006. And I understand that sometimes it takes a little while for our city to get it, but they got it. I mean, I've met so many people over the years that didn't even know we had 2 school boards. They didn't know that we were sitting in the dark. They didn't know that we couldn't even come into St. Louis Public School building. Some of them are down at 801 and have a meeting. They didn't know all that information. They did not know we had 2 boards. They didn't know that. They didn't know a lot of things about our school. I think our city has been overwhelmed with so many things going on, and we are in the midst of a gentrification. Effort has been put forth to remove Black and brown people from this city, and it's been very successful. We have tons of vacant property. Dr. Adams went over the numbers, and it's clear what's been going on. This is a very depressed, distressed place. And I have so many young people that have left this city because of that. So I appreciate the effort of allowing a little bit more time for people to come up with some answers and to help. It's time. But a lot of people are just concerned about living and making it from day to day right now. I know if people have jobs, they're okay. But I know far too many people that are not making it at all. We have far too many young men and women standing on the corner asking for a handout. We have far too many people standing in the gas line and Avenue E lines looking for assistance to try to keep their electric and their gas on. We have people that are struggling, that are dying on the street. So yes, this city has a lot of issues going on. And I guess the last thing right now is, my God, what else? The schools now. Yes, the schools have been suffering a long time, and we really do need the help. And I really appreciate other people stepping forward, like Dr. Adams said, come to the table with some concrete stuff. So I'm looking forward to them coming and really bringing something to the table to help.
Dr. Adams, I appreciate your flexibility and the recommendation that you've put forth to the board and really to the community. I think, context is important, and Dr. Roberts and I were having a conversation earlier, and we were talking about if one person has a truth and they come to the table and another person has a truth, we have 2 truths, but if they differ, that's where we have that dissonance. And I think that we have, with this situation being heavy and hearing what my fellow board members are saying, there are multiple truths. I think that, yes, people are showing up now and people do see this as super important. And I think we have an opportunity to harness that. And I think our community has an opportunity to harness that as well. Yes, schools have been on the list multiple times and they've been up for closure multiple times. But one thing that is unique is the fact that this board regained governance a little more than a year ago. So yes, those schools have been up with an SAB. And yes, those schools have been up when people felt like they haven't had a voice. And I think the two truths that I'm thinking about right now, yes, we are an extension of the community and we're here to make decisions for children on behalf of the community. But we're also an extension of the voice of the community, and we serve that dual role as elected officials that, you know, the SAB didn't have to really teeter between. But that being said, I think that, you know, when the community does show up, I think we need to look less about how long they haven't been there and appreciate the fact that they are here now. They want to help, and that we are giving them time to be able to provide those solutions that that we think could push us in the direction that we need to go in, or in the direction that the community thinks we need to go in. So I appreciate that. I look forward to that. I do like the idea of having some board members at meetings that we can attend to be able to listen and hear those thoughts and plans as well. But really, I really want to put that call out to the community and everyone who has been vocalizing the need to postpone and vocalizing the need for a plan to come to the table with us so that we can move forward together.
And hopefully this is my last comment on this, but one, I agree with Adam. I think we have a unique opportunity. Plus, we are going to be getting a new mayor, and I think that we have on that slate one or two that may possibly be more willing to support and hear the school district. And I think it'd really be helpful to have those candidates in to talk, because I think we have some promising candidates, if I'm honest. Dorothy, in your response to people could have known, I'm gonna be perfectly honest, I didn't know we were considering closing schools until late August when I joined the board, and I've been a member of this community a very long time. A lot of times people don't know unless there is some kind of public, you know, cry or you know, a more significant, there's more significant publicity surrounding it. You know, I'm a person who reads like the St. Louis American almost every week, and I simply did not know. Not that it's bad, and not that I'm against making the decision, because I think I can make decisions fairly quickly based on information, but I don't think it's so absurd that people didn't know. What I think maybe we should do to make sure we get to this matter is put a hard deadline on January 12th that we make this decision and agree that there aren't any more delays. Because I think the decision is important, because if nobody comes to the table with something that's going to give us resources, then we have to make these hard decisions to ensure our students get the resources. Maybe in this month time, the few billionaires we have in this community, maybe they'll give us some of their money. I don't know, doubtful. But let's put a hard deadline on making this decision and make that January 12th if we can agree to that. But in the meantime, let's appreciate the time we have, and let's talk to the mayoral candidates, because I think we'll hear a lot of good stuff from some of them. And let's hear what they have to say. If they come up with no plans, then we make this decision and we do what we're called to do.
So this district, I think, has been upholding the city's responsibility to children alone for a really long time. And if you're for the children and for the long-term health of the communities we serve, then we will stand beside you in this work, and we will do it with you. But what we cannot allow is another year of children and another year to continue to be denied the resources that they deserve while others have them, while we wait for history to repeat itself. So if you are an elected official or a nonprofit entity and you wrote a letter or signed a resolution or posted on social media that we should postpone this vote, then it is your moral responsibility to follow it up with a concrete plan of action that you can take within your control to help this school district. It is your moral responsibility to do that. And I'm hearing from my board members that we have a hard deadline of January 12th. With that, we have 2 items for consideration. Do you want a motion to remove one, or do we want to just make a motion to approve one? Tell me how you want to proceed.
I would move that we actually make a motion to postpone the vote until our January 12th meeting.
Natalie, I'm sorry, can you repeat yourself? We didn't hear you.
I'm sorry. I would make a motion that we actually remove this 12-15-20-01, move that it is postponed to a vote in January at our regular business meeting on the 12th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there questions or discussion on this?
I would like to add in this motion that we also make it somehow add that this is a hard deadline. So after that, a vote to be taken for sure.
Well, so are you wanting to amend the motion?
Is this a friendly amendment?
It is a friendly amendment.
I would accept that as a hard deadline.
That's what, so so I mean, if the motion is to postpone to January 12th, I don't know that, I mean, that is the hard deadline.
Yeah, I think it's repeating itself. So it's already stated for January
So
12th.
if the motion passes and it's moved to January, then,
Well, I think the
then
problem
it is on
that-
January, it would take another motion to move.
Correct.
Are there other comments or discussion on this?
Well, I think my concern is that tonight was a hard deadline too, and it was changed. So I guess I'm asking that the motion be that we move this vote to January 12th without further delay, something of that sort.
But I think and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. St. Omer, I don't think we can put language into a motion that would prevent future motions.
That is correct. And as the motion is structured, and what I would say what this board is doing is moving this item for consideration to the next meeting at the January 12th meeting. The board takes it up, they take it up. If they don't, they don't. But to Mr. Adams, you can't necessarily bind yourself in that regard.
Even if we state in this motion
Thank
that we
you.
want a hard deadline, once it comes up in January, we could theoretically do the same thing with parliamentary procedure as is happening right now. So I would accept that, to this motion, but I don't think it's going to accomplish your intention.
Is she talking?
Repeat the last part. I heard you say something about parliamentary procedure, but I didn't hear the last part.
Oh, I said I would accept the spirit of that amendment, that we want to hold ourselves to that January date, but I don't think via parliamentary procedure, it would accomplish necessarily what Ms. Fowler is hoping to.
Are there other questions or thoughts for discussion on the postponing of this, the motion to postpone? Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Vowell,
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins,
No.
motion passed.
Is there a motion to approve item 1215-2002 for the audit?
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on the audit? Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Bowell,
Yes.
S. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins,
Yes.
motion passed.
Board member reports, Susan,
None at this time.
Joyce,
None at this time.
Adam,
None at this time.
Regina,
None.
Donna. I have no further comments. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Ms.
Are we doing committee reports?
I'm sorry.
That was on the
Natalie, go
agenda.
ahead. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Are you saying, does Natalie have something to?
Oh, I thought, are we doing committee reports? Committee reports?
Yes.
We don't have committee reports on the agenda.
Okay.
Is that different from the board member report?
What, Natalie, do you want to make it as part of your board member report?
Yeah, it says board member reports, committees, board members, board president under item 7. Maybe I have an outdated version, but I just wanted to give an update on the governance committee. We did decide, we had a meeting scheduled for yesterday, actually. We did decide to postpone that. We are still working on the code of ethics, and we will be meeting on January 4th to discuss that and hopefully have something to bring before the board. But given this decision right now, it seemed like a more critical use of our time. So we have postponed until then. So if anybody has any input in the meantime, please let us know. Or if you want to work on that committee with us, we would welcome it.
Do you have anything from your committee? Adam, I'm talking. Do you have any committee report? I'm sorry, apparently.
Madam President, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Minutes, the approval of the minutes.
So our notice did not include the approval of the minutes. So the notice as it was posted did not include approval of minutes and they weren't listed out. Mr. St. Omer and I talked about this before the meeting, so we're,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, I wasn't aware. Okay.
No, it's fine. It's just, I think there's like the board docs agenda and then there's the notice. And so we had to get that straightened out. Okay. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
That we adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Bell?
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. D. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Bowell,
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins,
Yes.
adjourned.